morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. I've said it here and I'll say it again. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And we, Zimbabweans, are to blame for it. We have failed to acknowledge when we have done something wrong, preferring to bury our heads in the sand. There can be no doubt that the last 44 years have been a wasted period. Zanu PF has destroyed the country. The regime is a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime. And we have let them rule all these last 44 years. The one aspect that has allowed Zanu PF to stay in power all these years, is that they were able to rig elections. And we, the people, have failed to define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections and enforce that. That has been our biggest failing. But not only that, our failure to acknowledge that we've done something wrong has been our biggest shortcoming. When I was young, and I think this is not only me, but common to all humanity, in fact, we all believed in the biblical explanation that man was made in the image of God. And so when I started hearing about evolution, that mankind evolved from an ancestor, a common ancestor with chimps, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. On the screen is a drawing of that. That about 6 million years ago, mankind had a common ancestor with the chimps. And if we go back 10 million years ago, we had a common ancestor with the gorilla. This is the evolutionary tree. And if you were to go back 100, 200 million years ago, 500 million years ago, we find we had a common ancestor with the monkeys, and so forth and so on. If you go back, way back, you find with a common ancestor with no more than a garden slug. I am not exaggerating to say that I didn't want to accept evolution for no other reason than my misplaced pride. How could I have descended from an ancestor, a common ancestor with a chimp, a gorilla, much less a slug? Could not accept that. But the truth is, that is the reality. There's overwhelming evidence to show that that was indeed the case. And I think to stubbornly maintain, hang on to this idea that man was made in the image of God, it did not evolve like all other living things from an evolutionary tree where we shared at one point or another common ancestors with monkeys, slugs, is an outrage. It is stupid. We've got to learn to stop this habit of burying our heads in the sand and somehow pretend that reality will change. It doesn't. There's a very simple explanation why many Zimbabweans out there would not accept that our leaders are corrupt and incompetent. In some cases, utterly useless. I think George Orwell, in his book, gave it a rational explanation. The first time I read George Orwell's Animal Farm, in it he described a character, Boxer, the horse. And he says Boxer the horse took just as long as other animals took to learn the first 4 letters of the alphabet in the time that other animals learned all the 26 letters of the alphabet. That's how slow he was. And when they went on to the next 4 letters of the alphabet, and by the time, and it took just as long again to learn those 4. And by the time it mastered those 4 letters, it was discovered that he had forgotten the first 4 letters. Of course, Boxer and whoever was teaching him gave up. And it expired that Boxer struggled to put any rational ideas, to string together any rational ideas of his own. And he did the simplest thing that you can imagine. He decided that he would support whatever Napoleon was the leader said or did. And so he took up this motto that Comrade Napoleon is always right. This is a mentality that is, I thought George Orwell was exaggerating. No human being could do that. But I've since learned that actually he was right. I think in Zimbabwe we have got a lot of boxers out there with the mentality of Boxer the horse and refusing to accept it is as foolish as refusing to accept evolution. It is true. We have got people who have supported Nagagwa, Mugabe before him, Chamisa Changirai before him, with the same mentality of Boxer the horse, where the leader is always right and should not be questioned. And I believe that is why Zimbabwe is a failed We have allowed these buffoons to completely destroy the country because we could not accept that they failed. Once we had accepted them as our leader, they could do no wrong. I have said, and I'll say it again, Zimbabwe is a failed state because we've got a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF regime ruling the country. And they've managed to stay in power all these last 44 years because they rigged the elections. Solve the problem, stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, and the country can finally start addressing the issues of bad governance. Because rigged elections are at the very heart of that problem. Zanu PF, as long as they know they can rig elections and get away with it, we are stuck with them. We are stuck with a bad government. I believe if Zanu PF, if there were to be free, fair, and credible elections, some of the idiotic ideas that Zanu PF has pursued over the last 44 years, they would have never pursued them because they will know they'll be held to account. So even Zanu PF itself would improve if they were forced to be accountable. That is where we have got the problem. We need to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Well, there are two ways of doing it. One is we can go back and wage another war, just as we did to end white colonial rule. I believe we don't need that. What we need is to have competent opposition who will force Zanu PF to implement democratic reforms and hold free, fair, and credible elections. That opportunity did arise during the GNU. That was the golden opportunity to get those reforms implemented. The question then is, why did MDC fail to implement the reforms? And this is where we come to this, the leader is always right mentality. The truth is, Robert Mugabe during the GNU was the president. And he bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and company with trappings of high office. And the MDC leaders forgot about the reforms. That is the truth. Why we failed as the electorate to see what was happening during the GNU beggars belief. Why we are failing to see it even now with the benefit of hindsight. It's unforgivable. But the truth is that is what happened. And what is more is the acceptance that we can elect competent opposition leaders to implement those reforms. Just because Morgan Tsvangirai and company failed to implement those reforms doesn't mean nobody else can implement those reforms. But we have got an opposition supporters out there who are so, we've got such a fixation, this boxer, the horse mentality that the leader is always right. They've refused to see that the MDC leaders, Triple C leaders have failed. It beggars belief the ease with which Chamisa persuaded Zimbabweans, and 2 million of them, according to ZEC, who voted for the opposition last year, persuaded them to participate in that election, when they've been told again and again and again that the election process is flawed, their participation in that election will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. It will not change anything. It will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. And thus perpetuate the dictatorship. And yet, they still went ahead and participated. And worse still, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, you look back and say, well, have you learned something from that? I think it is clear that they've not learned anything at all. Chamisa and his Triple C, while he claimed that the party was going to win big, it turned out that it didn't. He was wittering on about strategic ambiguity, refusing to have a proper constitution, structure, elected officials, and claiming that was strategic ambiguity. Well, it has turned out that it wasn't strategic at all. Because others have exploited that weakness. That is the reason why Zawango was able to claim that he was the secretary of the party, Triple C. And having made that claim, went on to recall a number of elected Triple C officials, causing chaos in the party. I think it is no exaggeration to say that Triple C imploded. And you would think that Triple C supporters, that 200 million head, would now be saying, right, what happened here? Let's have a proper explanation what happened here. What are you going to say to make sure that this hasn't happened again? No, of course not. They haven't. Chamisa himself has resigned from the party, abandoned it, without even giving any notice to anybody, much less an explanation, other than to say that the party has been infiltrated by Zanu PF and is abandoning it in despair. But that hasn't stopped him planning to launch another party. Chamisa Express is reloading, we are told. And what worries me is that the reloaded Chamisa Express will participate in the 2028 elections without even one token reform implemented. No doubt you'll be telling his followers that whatever the new party is called, is going to win big because he's got strategies of how to win rigged elections. And the head will participate in the 2028 elections, just as they did last year, and thus giving the process legitimacy. This cycle is going to carry on after 44 years of rigged elections. At least we should have the common sense to know what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. And to say, this is what we want. And stop all this absolutely incredibly foolishness of participating in flawed elections. Just repeating the same thing over and over again. Whether we like it or not, Boxer the horse in George Orwell's Animal Farm was stupid. No human being should ever behave like Boxer, where you give up your humanity because the ability to think is uniquely human. That is what has made human beings what we are. Of all the creatures out there, the humans have managed to conquer the world, if you want, because of their ability to think. But above everything else is what has made human beings the masters of this planet. And I think we have to learn from that ourselves. We have to accept that what we have been doing in the past was stupid. We've got to accept reality. Evolution, as much as I don't like to hear that I'm a descendant, I had a common ancestor with a chimp or a gorilla, but it is the reality. And to pretend that somehow it's different, it's ridiculous. These are some of the drawings to show the similarities between the human being and the gorilla. You cannot deny the evidence. It's there. As much as I don't like to see the resemblance, the truth is the resemblance is there. We can deny it, but that won't change the reality. And I think it is absolutely foolish to waste time pretending that the likes of Chamisa will win rigged elections. The truth of the matter is, Chamisa and company had the golden opportunity to implement reforms. They failed to do so. And now we need to elect competent opposition leaders who will implement the reforms. Because we need to get out of this economic and political mess we are in. Food for thought.
When you're dead, you don't know that you're dead. But it's really difficult for others. It's kind of the same like when you're stupid.
In many ways, she's right. I think stupidity is a curse worse than death. The dead do not suffer because of their status. The stupid do. Thank you very much. Have a good day.